Dr. Yeske is a senior member of the veterinary team at the Swine Vet Center in St. Peter, Minnesota, which includes more than 15 veterinarians. I don't know how many every year you updated.
We're up to 17, yeah.
17 veterinarians. He obtained his DVM degree at Iowa State University in 1985 and a master's from the University of Minnesota. Paul says that he's done a little bit of everything, but most recently he's known for his work on mycoplasma and its elimination from swine herds. I had to talk about myco. So few people in the hog industry is as well known as Dr. Paul Yeske with more than 30 years of experience, and he has gained recognition for his work with disease management and elimination. He has earned the Howard Dune Memorial Lecture Award and the Swine Practitioner of the Year and the Leman Science in Practice Award. He enjoys the problem solving involved in making elimination programs fit into a production system. So I believe that this is a session that you may be actually enjoying, Paul. So thank you for agreeing to talk.
Very good, thank you. And when Monse had contacted me about the talk and we talked a little bit, today's talk is a little bit of a teaser for tomorrow. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more as an industry. And the question earlier today, and I had a hard time sitting there, was yes, I believe we can eliminate from the industry, and yes, I believe it's time to do it, but I'm going to talk about that tomorrow. And so today we're going to talk more about eliminating it from the farm. And I think, Monse, if Carlos was here, this would be a topic that Carlos would love. Carlos would be behind this project 100% because it's something we can do. We can take an action, we can make it happen, and very well fits into this, this topic and this session. So again, the things I'm going to bring to you today aren't from myself alone, but from the entire group at the Swine Vet Center. I put this, I went back and reviewed some old PED talks, and I put this in because when PED was breaking, this was a mandatory PED slide. Everybody had to have it. And so I put it in for context for some of the younger practitioners out there. Again, it reminds us what PED can do and how graphic that is. So we've talked a little bit about PED status. I'm going to give a little bit of my twist on it today. Some experience with eliminations, and what do we still need to know? Well, in September, I think Al did a great job when he lined up this conference to be in September. It's before all the disease starts, so we can feel really confident that we're making good progress. And so you can see here that we're very quiet so far. But to me, when I look at this, Cesar, the concerning area for me is we still have roughly about 20% of the industry that's continuing to have field infection going on. We can argue if that number's right or wrong, but there's still a significant amount of the industry using controlled exposure. And so I think that's a little bit, like Bill said, playing with fire. And we see that over time, again, we've seen this chart multiple times here, but that incidence is very low. It has been coming up here in the recent years. We had kind of a nice stretch here where it really felt like we were making tremendous progress and we could push it out maybe on its own, but looks like it's going to take a little more concerted effort. Whoops. And when we talked about the SDRS, I appreciate the warning signal, Giovanni, that the red flag's up. It's just like there's a few out there that have gray hair like I do. That remember TGE was always an every other year disease. You had to get enough negative population to have those outbreaks happen again. And you can see here, we're into that second year. So again, probably more animals at risk. So again, I went back and looked at some old slides to say, what were some of the lessons we learned in the acute outbreak and what can we learn from history? Well, we learned that PED on a sow farm isn't fun. We get this number of pigs going out. We wean a lot of pigs to try and save them, and then we don't wean any pigs. And then we have this kind of a rebound here where we don't have, we get back to good production, but we're not back to great production until we get through a full cycle. And the reproductive impacts of some of those animals breeding, some of those issues. We found out that the Indel strain wasn't near as big of a challenge for us in the industry, but still a challenge. and still had some pretty big effects. And again, we had the pre-weaning mortality as you're cleaning up and not moving pigs around, and then there's some of that reproductive effect as well. And the role of transport in disease transmission. We've talked a lot about that this morning already. I think it's key because I do think it is one of the big things, one of our big risk areas. And this was a study done in June, and right after PED broke, to survey the slaughter plants and say how far did it go. And I think it's a great collaboration of ASV group and Jim Lowe leading the group here and helping us get this project underway and collecting those samples at the plant. And it was a real simple study. You just tested the truck when it went to the plant before it unloaded, and you tested the truck after it. Then after the pigs were unloaded, and saw what was positive before and what was positive after. And certainly we saw that trucks were getting infected at the slaughter plant, and that certainly was a risk for us, and tells us that, again, we had a much higher odds ratio of being positive when the personnel entered the trailer, and a much higher odds ratio when you were following a positive trailer. So again, telling us that there is transmission there, telling us it is a risk. And I think it's one of those things we just have to continue to think about as we think about these control procedures and the biosecurity talk we just had. The slaughter plant and the cull yards, I would put those both into the same category. The trucks go back and forth. They go back to the sow farms. They go back to the wean to finish facilities. And so that becomes that conduit of transmission. And this is a picture of Dr. Steve Tusina when he was with our group and did a manure study looking at how viable is it in the pit. We wanted to know. Again, we saw the CTs were lower at 4 months in the deep pits versus 6 months. At the 4-month time frame on bioassay, the pigs were still positive at 6 months. For the number of samples we looked at, they weren't. So again, tells us it's a risk there, and it's difficult to quantify, but tells us that it's still certainly a risk. Whoops. We had an opportunity. This is a poster that I presented here at the Leman conference. We had an opportunity where we were stocking a farm, and it was right in the heat of the battle where a lot of herds were breaking. They were going into a pig dense area where there's a lot of PED, and the owner says, he had 2 other farms. He goes, I'm not going to break this new farm. I'm not farrowing any farms, so let's expose the farm before we even start the farrow, because all the animals are on site. And so he goes, you guys have a few weeks to play with here. Do what you want. And so we tested. They had an on-site GDU, so we didn't expose the on-site GDU till later. And we tested people. Again, we tested swabs up the nose, swabs in the ear, and then we tested hands and a number of different things. And so, again, you can see that there wasn't a lot of positives, but there was. We were still moving it around. They're pretty high CT values, and not a lot of samples, but we took a look at it. And the manager, again, spending a little more time away from the pigs, so didn't have as many positives on the manager. The gestation workers, where we were doing the big exposure, we had some sows in farrowing, but really didn't spend it. We weren't farrowing yet. So you can see that, again, those people having contact with the pigs were the most likely to be exposed. And again, when we looked at was it ear, nose, really didn't see any difference. But the reality is, the end of the day, we never carried it to the negative pigs in the GDU just by showering out and showering in and having a bench. So it was a filtered unit. The GDU is about 300 yards away, and we never carried it across. So again, the biosecurity works, and we can contain some of this stuff if we follow the rules. So what do we do in the outbreak? Amansi asked, and Maria asked me to talk more about what do we do in the outbreak, and so I'll finally get to my topic. Again, once we see clinical signs, or we confirm positive, usually we do it just like the previous speaker said, we do it when we can think they're positive. We do the immediate lockdown of the site. The goal is the biocontainment. The goal is to try and keep it on site. and look at anything that touched the farm in the last 72 hours, because we know that's the most likely time frame. And I would agree we probably need to look further back, but we certainly need to lock down those things at that time. And then we contact all swine farms within a 3 to 5 mile radius to let them know that something's happening, trying to protect the neighborhood. If they have critical pigs, they can get them out of their sight while we're working on cleaning up. And generally, it depends upon where it's breaking. If it's breaking and farrowing, you may not even have enough time to do that. If it's breaking in gestation, we'll oftentimes wean down to that 7 to 8 day range to try and get those pigs off the site and get those pigs so that we can try and save those pigs from the outbreak. If we're going to try and do that, again, it takes lots of bedding. We certainly want to prevent any additional stress to those pigs. If they're not wet, they're going to be wet. If they're not scouring, they're probably going to be scouring. And so just keeping those pigs dry and trying to keep those pigs as warm as we can is really important. And you have to prepare the site that those pigs are going to. The barn is going to get young scouring pigs. That's always fun if you're the contract grower. And again, you have to have extra heat lamps. You have to have extra heat. May require an additional furnace to get that barn up to the temperature you want to be at. And then some of these systems, when we were doing these projects, we would send extra labor. Some of them even had extended labor or 24/7, essentially 24/7, trying to, again, save as many pigs as we can. So that's the first things you do right immediately after the outbreak. Then you have to come to the decision road of what am I going to do with the herd? We can allow the herd to remain positive. Well, that's never a good thing. And, or I shouldn't say never a good thing. It's not good to just leave it be positive. You have to have a controlled approach. If we are going to do ongoing exposure, you have to have controlled exposure. You have to make sure that those animals are exposed and no longer shedding when they come to the herd, so they minimize that risk to the sow population and to the pig population. One of the challenges is in those systems we do see periodic flare-ups, and especially if that time gets shortened or the cool down, something doesn't happen properly in that cool down phase, and then you've got potential spread to other sites from that ongoing exposure. We can eliminate the field strain from the herd. We certainly know we can do that. And then the old depup, repup. If we've got other health challenges, maybe a good time to look at a depopulation, repopulation. I wouldn't do it for PED, but if you've got poor parity structure, if the markets are right, if you've got multiple other diseases, it's a good opportunity to, that's the fastest return to good production, is to do a depup, repup. It's not easy. So again, once we've decided we're going to go down an elimination phase, we go ahead and look at the starting the herd exposure. We're trying to encourage the virus to move around the herd. We're letting those scouring, vomiting sows out, and and the off feeds out, trying to, again, to encourage that and get things moving around the farm. Uh-oh. Okay. So again, we use the feedback for exposure. I think all of you are well aware of this, but certainly the feedback works well. And trust me, when you're in the outbreak, you got plenty of pigs. You don't have to worry about feedback. You're going to have plenty of material to work with. Our goal has always been to get 100% clinical signs. Reality is you get about 70%. We mark the pigs, or mark the sows, so we know if they were off feed, if they scoured, and if they vomited. And you generally didn't see very many sows that showed all signs, but if we added them all together, we got to about 70%, and when we went back and did some serologic monitoring, we would find that those animals were 100% positive. But, certainly easy to see when you see the sows that have the diarrhea or vomiting, and again, our goal is to try and get everybody exposed in a relatively short period of time. The load, close, and homogenize, just like we do with other herd closures. And when we started out with 150 days. We moved down to 120 days pretty rapidly, and I would say the last few we've done, we've been able to get them quieted down very rapidly. And Cesar, I think that the work you guys did just shows that that's true, that we're able to do it faster than what we were when we first started. Unfortunately, we've gotten better at it. And so, again, depopulating pigs to reduce the load. Some systems will go ahead and abort some of the sows. Some systems will euthanize those pigs as they're born, again, to reduce that environmental contamination, trying to reduce the load. And then using good hygiene, and we say there's clean and there's PED clean, and so PED clean is very clean. And then using strict McRebel protocols. So we clean up, typically what we did was we've gone in and cleaned up those gestation barns about 30 days later. Again, what we're trying to do is reduce viral load. And so we know we've had a lot of virus out there. We know there's still going to be virus in the population. But if we go through and wash down that barn, just makes you feel better that you're not dragging stuff around to those younger pigs again. When you're going to start having negative pigs, when you're going to start having pigs that are survivable again being born. And the cleanup of the farrowing rooms, like I said, you can't underestimate how clean it has to be, and really focusing on that cleanup. And using the whitewash was certainly very helpful, using some dry powdered barn lime around the walkways, etc. Certainly helped to reduce carrying some of that around, again, once we started having surviving pigs. Again, we want to, the aborted sows, we talked about that already in the McRebel. So again, how do we know when we're making progress? Again, this one's relatively easy to know from a monitoring standpoint. Are you seeing any diarrhea in the piglets? And the piglets return to normal. The mortality returns to normal fairly quickly once you have the immunity, and as long as the piglets are suckling colostrum. So that's why we're very strict on the McRebel, is if the piglets aren't suckling, the piglets aren't eating, you're going to have a higher risk of having contamination back through the system. Typically what we've done is go through and do rectal swabs for 6 weeks on 60 litters. Some people will do 30 rectal swabs, some do 60, depends a little bit, for 3 consecutive months. So again, it's more of the speed that you want to consider the herd negative. If you're going for the 90-day, you probably want to do the weekly testing and feel confident. But generally, surprisingly enough versus PERS, when we've seen PED go negative on piglet testing, it tends to stay negative. And so once you get a negative test, then you're good. Very rarely did we see them flare up and have us give positives later on. The Swiffer sampling, just like the booty sampling, again, we could probably use the booties now to do that, so that might make it easier for sampling hallways and any areas of interest on the farm. Again, that extreme clean, like we talked about, the power wash is going to be, you're not doing a lot of pig work at that time, so you got a lot of time to wash and clean, so it's a good opportunity to take care of that. The disinfection and the biocontainment. I was really happy to hear that in the previous talk. Again, washing the hallway, barn liming the hallways. What can we do to make sure that we're not carrying the virus around the farm? And I pulled back this slide from some of those old ones we had. This was just some of the herds that we tracked through early on. And you can see that there was certainly significant mortality when we had the original strains coming through the herds. When we got the indel, much less mortality from that strain. And again, the pigs per mated female, we should early wean every week because we can get up to 60 pigs per. So those extra pigs weaned helps, but then it really hurts back out here. So again, and the pigs weaned per 1,000 sows, again, certainly we're able to see those differences. The wean to finish, and we talked a little bit about that. I wanted to talk not only about sow farms, but also about wean to finish. And the seasonal pattern for us, and it's different than Canada, our seasonal pattern is that December to January to February timeframe, and you can see it, they're very repeatable when we looked at it on the SDRS chart there. And I looked at a system where we had roughly about 1 million pigs on feed, and they have this was last winter's data. All sow farms were negative, so there weren't any positive farms at that time contributing pigs, the positive pigs to the system. They had an internal wean pig fleet, so that fleet never went out of the system, never contacted any markets, cull markets or markets. And then they had an internal fleet to transfer the pigs from the nursery to the finish. Again, those didn't contact markets. And then they had a contract market fleet that was washed every load. So this last winter, they had a few nurseries get positive, so a pretty low percentage. They had more of the finishers end up being positive, and there probably was some that didn't get tested, to be fair. And if we looked at all the wean to finish, we're about 7.4% of the pigs were affected in that particular system. So what are some of the things we can do? And we've had some of that discussion this morning already on what can we do on the grow-finish side. We know transport's a risk. We know that a lot of these sites get contaminated at the end of marketing and when the pigs come in. So having a two-stage loadout with 2 lines of separation is certainly something we can do. And I'd like to thank Daryl. I got his name on the next 2 slides, but I missed this one. I just saw it this morning, so sorry about that, Daryl. But here, where you've got the driver staying in the truck, and then we've got the traditional loadout would be everybody goes back and forth to the chute, and the line of separation is at the truck. With the staged loadout, you'd have the driver staying in the truck, you'd have the line of separation here at the truck, you'd have the person loading the truck in a line of separation where that person only comes into the hallway or to that first pen, but you make a second line of separation in the barn, and then the barn staff never gets beyond that second line of separation. And again, for PED, I think this is an effective way of helping us get that done. They did a study, one of Daryl's graduate students did a study looking at that, and they put glow germ in the back of the truck, and you can see that the chutes almost always got contaminated. You can see that the sort boards also got contaminated, so it's telling us stuff comes out of the truck, and if PED's there, PED comes out of the truck. So again, the PED is easier to eliminate out of wean to finish. We run those on an all-in, all-out by site basis. If you're not, you're going to have to. So you may have to double load some facilities. You may have to rent some additional space so you can get them empty if you're not being able to run them on an all-in, all-out basis. We double disinfect, usually one of those being whitewash. We've done some fumigation with formaldehyde, or the Zono has disinfectants that we could fumigate. But we know for us the cold weather is our biggest challenge, and so certainly if you've got an outside chute and you've got this kind of weather, it's going to be difficult to wash and clean up PED outside. So that's one of the challenges. Sometimes you just have to wait on some of these grow finish sites till things warm up. And the offices become an important part of control. The barn lime, I appreciate the slides again in previous lecture on the barn lime. This is using some of the Stelisan as a disinfectant, as a dry disinfectant outside the barns. The nice thing about the pink is you can see it and you can track it a little bit. You can also do it with a lime. Again, the fecal samples, rectal swabs, oral fluids. Now I'll have to try the booties for ways we can diagnose. And I appreciate Bill's comments on the MLV vaccine. When I saw this data at the ASV meeting on the research work that had been done, it's preliminary data, but it looks like it may be a good tool for us potentially as we go forward. As we look at this, we can see that when those animals were re-exposed and the higher back passages here, there was really no shedding. So there was some shedding with the vaccine virus, but when the animals were re-exposed with field virus, there wasn't any shedding. And so again, this could be a tremendous biocontainment tool for us. And I would agree with Bill. I'm not going to mess with it in sow farms. but I may see a place when we got these dense areas in grow finish to help reduce some of that shedding and some of those areas where we're concerned about. But the tool's got to continue to move forward. Today it's research. It's not a tool we can take to the field and use. So hopefully that can continue to move forward. And Cesar, I pulled this slide in over the weekend, and I know you talked about it, but I just wanted to use it as a summary. When I saw it is, yep, we're getting better at it. Unfortunately, we still got to do it. And so that's the biggest challenge is we know how to do it better, we know how to do it faster, but it's still something we have to do on that certain percentage of herds. So I think we had a great discussion on biosecurity, the bioexclusion. That's the one we all know about, the forgotten child in biosecurity is biocontainment. And again, handling those mortalities, the boots and coveralls and compost sites or dead areas on grow finish are certainly our big risk areas and the ones that we want to make sure that we continue to be working on. Again, the MLV vaccine, again, it's just research at this point. I don't think it's going to be a replacement for elimination. So I don't see it as a replacement for elimination. I see it as an opportunity for us to have a biocontainment tool on the wean to finish side in these difficult areas. So currently, I believe we have we've eliminated PED from so many farms so many times that I think we know what to do on elimination from individual farms. We know we can have good long-term success. Cesar, you told us that we're having a lot of the farms that were positive once, but they weren't positive again. And so again, it tells us that we can eliminate it, and we can eliminate it successfully for long periods of time. And we know in the finishing that we end up eliminating it from a lot of sites every winter. And so again, that's, I think, going to be our long-term goal. So at the end of the day, I believe the battle can be won. I believe we can eliminate it from a farm. I believe we can eliminate it from an area. I believe we can eliminate it from the industry. I believe we have the necessary tools to do it today. Would it be nice to have the MLV to help us? Yep, but we can do it even without that. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Paul, for the presentation. We do have a question. Yep.
Hey, Paul, thanks for the talk. Do you think it's important to, several speakers put it up there, but then nobody really talked about indel versus prototype. Do you think it's important to distinguish that in your diagnostics? And do you have any experience managing herds with indel versus prototype? Do you do anything differently?
Yeah, it's a good question. We unfortunately got to see some of the indel, and I think it's probably more important in the diagnostics and doing the sequencing to predict the outcome for the farm. That's probably the greatest value, is what's the impact going to be. From a cleanup standpoint, I really don't see it different at all. And it's still, you're still going to follow the same procedures. I would say it maybe goes a little bit faster, but that would be the comments that I would have on the indel.
Other questions? There's one question there, Paul.
Hey, Paul, thank you for your presentation. This is a question for you and probably the rest of the speakers. I remember in the past, we were using a lot this time to baseline production metric.
Yep.
I'm wondering why we don't still using it as a common language, and also if there is any data that shows trends, how much have we progressed, in terms of that. So.
Yeah, I think the time to baseline, whether we're talking about PERS or we're talking about PED, again, I think those are important parameters, particularly for production, to say how are we doing, are you moving along the right path? And I think that's a good goal, or a good metric to follow from a production metric to say, if you're in an elimination program, are you making progress? Because you should see those numbers come back and then be fairly consistent and continue to get back to that baseline or better. And so it's a fair comment. We probably don't talk about it enough, and it is certainly still a good metric to follow as you're going through the elimination.